Hello folks, it's Frank again, Frank Severely Normal. Today I want to take 5 minutes to go over the record of the Progressive Conservatives, find out where they've taken us, how we've gotten back, etc, etc, etc. After that I want to talk about something specific. Anyway, let's start here. Let's start at the beginning. In the beginning, before the Tories, in 1947, oil was discovered in Leduc. Here, get my pointer. Mr. Messier used to use a pointer. 1947, oil was discovered in Leduc. Number one oil well drill. In 1969, a responsible government, realizing oil prices fluctuate. They fluctuate. Rachel told you, oil goes up, oil goes down. So we all know that. Oil goes up, oil goes down. It's nothing that you can depend to pay your bills on, the royalties of it. So in 1969, because in 1966 they passed the Medical Care Act. The Medical Care Act means that the federal government will pay half of the health care costs. Health care had been mandated all across the country ever since it turned out to be a success. Tommy Douglas in Saskatchewan. So the Medical Care Act said that the federal government will pay the costs, half of the costs, and the province has to pick up the rest. Well, we didn't have the money to pick up the rest unless oil revenues were up. Well, the good and responsible government, that's Harry Strom and the Social Credit, back in 1969 introduced the Alberta Healthcare Premium Tax as a way to bolster our income so that we could pay our medical bills, which were mounting because medical advances were being made and blah blah blah. We had a new university hospital. My sisters were born there. So we got the Medical Care Act in 1966. In 1969 we got Alberta healthcare premiums. Now 2 years later we got a new government. The pro-cons. They're pro, they're con. They're the Progressive Conservatives. The Progressive Conservatives, over the next 22 years, proceeded to drive us $22 billion into debt. $22 billion into debt. Oh yes, I know there was a national energy program, but in order to recoup from that, they did a lot of investing. Rachel's going to do some investing. She's going to invest $34 billion. Let's get back on topic. So they drove us $22 billion into debt. Lawrence Decore came along as leader of the Liberals, having already served 2 stints as mayor of Edmonton. I'm not sure how many stints he served as mayor. But anyway, he was a popular mayor and he was a good mayor. And he came along as the leader of the provincial Liberals, and he offered a credible alternative. Well, this scared the Tories a bit, so Don Getty retired, and the Tories whipped out, who I like to call, hang on, let me reach in my pocket and whip out Clownface Ralph. Now, you all know him as King Ralph, but I know him, in my mind, as Clownface Ralph, because he put his clown face on, and he said we had to have some hard and brutal cuts. Because Lawrence was saying we had to have some drastic cuts, so Ralph said we had to have some brutal cuts. And so then it was a popularity contest between the 2 former mayors of our major cities, and the incumbent party won. So Ralph Klein then became our premier. So he became the face of the new Tory party. And he said, trying to put my Ralph Klein smile here, folks, he said, I ain't gonna blink. And he didn't blink. For 13 years he didn't blink. He grabbed us by the throats and he squeezed $3 billion a year, $40 billion out of us more than was needed to run the government over that 13-year period. Now, how do I come at $40 billion? Well, we started at $22 billion in the hole. He took us $22 billion out of debt. And along the way, 10 years after he was elected, he started in 2004 the Sustainability Fund. I don't know how much he started at. I've got it here at $3 billion. Maybe that's how much extra we had then. But anyway, he started the Sustainability Fund, and at the same time he announced that we would not collect healthcare premiums from people over 65 years old. Now, you may be a millionaire, but if you're 65 years old, you don't have to pay your taxes. What kind of responsible government is that? So, I don't know how much we lost per year on that. I'm going to estimate, but I don't know how much we lost on that part of the Alberta healthcare file when they canceled the collection of premiums from senior citizens. So we went along, and this slush fund, sustainability fund, eventually, it wasn't a sustainability fund anymore because Ralph retired. Now, Ralph retired in 2006 or 7, and Ed Stelmach came in. I believe 2006. Ed Stelmach came in. And all that time, the Sustainability Fund was becoming more sustainability-able. It was getting bigger and bigger. In fact, it peaked. It grew from 3 to 5 and peaked in 2009 at $13.9 billion. Now, that's an important year, 2009, because while this was happening in 2008, I believe it was in April of 2008, if I'm not mistaken, Iris Evans called a news conference and said, starting next year, we won't be collecting any Alberta healthcare premium funds. We don't have this anymore. Let's wipe out the whole system. Now, I want to show you the effect of that. So in my last video, I did show you the effect of this, but not the whole effect of it. So the effect turned out to be, with interest and population increase, the uncollected money turned out to add up to $8.04 billion when you apply the interest in a negative sense. And we were in a negative sense. In the meantime, during those 6 years, the fluctuating price of oil, as Rachel Notley showed us on her wonderful graphs, the fluctuating price of oil over those 6 years ate away at our Sustainability Invincibility Fund, slush fund, there's no other word for it, and the Tories invented every single excuse in the book as to why the finances were the way they were, and in fact they changed the way we do the books, they changed the way we do our accounting, they did everything they could to keep everybody's mind off of the fact that our finances were being skewered by the fact that they refused to do their job and collect our taxes and put them here in the public purse. And that is their job. They drove us into debt, only to come out. Now let's look at all the scandals. Wait, let's stop and look at Tory rule. Let's look at all the scandals here. Ed Stelmach, going back, Ralph Klein wasn't elected. He was acclimated by the party. Then he was elected in a tight race with Lawrence DeCour. Then once he had used his usefulness, they had a leadership race, a three-way leadership race, in which the least popular guy became our premier. So he was elected by the Progressive Conservative Party, not by you and me, by the Progressive Conservative Party, to be our premier. So then he came in and he announced that we don't have to pay this tax anymore. And then he called an election. And since we didn't have to pay that tax anymore, and since we were in such a great fiscal position, we thought he was doing a good job. So we elected him. Biggest majority ever. As soon as he was elected, he proceeded to give himself and all the other cabinet members 30% raises. 30% raises. The weakest people in our society, the people on social services, got a $50 raise in 2011. A $50 raise for every social services client in 2011. I feel maybe we should be grateful, but you be the judge of that. So then, after giving himself a $30,000 raise, he did exactly what he said Iris Evans said he was going to do, is cancel the health care premium and drive us into debt. Yes, the $13.9 billion is gone too because of the fluctuating price of oil. Now, where we are today, and you say where we are today, has nothing to do with the government we have today. Why am I talking about the government we had before? Because they refuse to acknowledge. In fact, they claim it as an advantage that we have the best tax system. We have the best tax system. We rely on oil, and Notley says, oh, we can't rely on oil. But then she says we have the best tax system because we don't have the Alberta health care premium tax. And because we don't have a sales tax. Did I swear again? I'm sorry. Tax is a 3-letter word, not a 4-letter word. And taxes are a necessary thing in our lives to pay for the things we need. Do you expect the oil in the ground to pay for the things you need? If you lived in somewhere where they don't have oil, how would you pay as a society for the things you need? Now, after they gave themselves raises and canceled the Alberta health care, they released this beauty. Now, I got this out of the newspaper. I didn't know about this. I got this out of the newspaper a month or so ago. U of A medical researchers face funding crisis. And in here it says that the U of A medical researchers are wondering what they're going to do because their funding has been pulled. A move that was made when? In 2009. In 2009, the Alberta government pulled the funding, effective in 2018, on medical research at the U of A. Now I ask, could it possibly be because they knew what was going to happen and that they wouldn't have the money over here in 2018? Because they knew the money wasn't going to be there because this was a plan that was planned out. This was a 12-year plan by the Tories. Starting in 2003, when the announcement was made that in 2004 there would be no health care premiums for old people, continuing on until 2008 when they knew they were going to have an election. So they made this announcement that we weren't going to have health care premiums anymore. And you know how Canadians are. We think we have free health care. There's no such thing. But when they say, oh, you don't have to pay premiums, we go, oh, good. But how are services getting paid for if we're not collecting taxes? How do we pay for them? We blame everybody else. We say it's the rich people aren't paying enough. We say it's the poor people who take too much. Really? So, now, then we get over here. There's the research funding being pulled in 2018. Okay, so now we're done with Stelmach, and Stelmach retires because the dirty deeds have been done and it's time for him to move on. They want somebody else new in there. So they're going to have another leadership race. Now, we had Gary Marr running against Alison Redford. And the party obviously wanted Marr to come in. He was a long-time guy there. Redford was a UN lawyer of some kind before she came here to join our government. She was the Solicitor General or Minister of this or Minister of that. When she ran for the leadership, she was losing. She was losing until she promised one of the unions, the Alberta Teachers Association, that she would restore some funding that the government had pulled back. She wasn't even the premier yet. She wasn't even in charge yet, and she was promising this. So on the promise of giving them some of our dollars, she got elected as head of their leader, and we know how that all ended up. Now, they forced her to retire. We, the media, her party, forced her to resign. And they waited a suitable period, and they brought in their white knight. Way on from the high towers of high finance, banking industry, Mr. Jim Prentice. Now, Mr. Jim Prentice came in and he read the books. He took his time. We didn't hear from him until he rented the airtime with our money to scold, to accuse, and to blame us for what his party had done. And this continues. Until this program is restored, we're facing this loss. And this is all in relation to where we were in 2008. All this loss is in relation to where we were, and this is all due to this. Actually, it's this. That's adding in the interest and the population increase. Of course, there ain't no more population increase because people are leaving the province because what the Tories have done to us. What Notley's going to do to us. She's already had a little tete-a-tete with you in her kitchen to set you up for the budget coming out next week. Now, this is going to be my last video till after the budget. I've already got plans for my videos, but I want to wait because I might want to fine-tune them depending on what Notley has to say. Now, I'm going to give her a bit of advice right now. Notley, reverse this decision. Reverse the cancellation of the Alberta Healthcare Premium Tax. My sister has $2,400 in her bank account from these 6 years. That belongs in the public purse. Collect it. XYZ company with 1,000 employees has $44,000 times 12 months times 7 years now that they've been holding on to the money that belongs in the public purse. And if it would have been in there in the first place, we wouldn't have been in debt. And I'm going to tell you people, if we wouldn't have been in debt, if the government hadn't done this, this would be up here. Because if this wasn't down here at 8 billion, this wouldn't be at 7.8. It would be up at 0, and nobody would have voted for Notley, except her hardcore Notley crews. And that's only 30% of the population. We are not a socialist province. And we're going to turn this tide around. And we're not going to do it with the Tories. Rick McIver, you can sit down now and don't say anymore, because you were there all along. Folks, I got to go now. Until I see you again, this is Frank Severity Normal telling you to please take care.